Hi, everybody. My name is Kurt Franklin. I'm the webinar and events manager here at Fulcrum, and I wanted to say welcome to our webinar today. No, really, how far can AI push fieldwork in the next 2 years? If you come to a lot of our webinars, you might notice we upgraded our GoToWebinar platform, and there's some changes. So you'll pardon me if there's any technical hiccups, but I think we should be good to go. Presenting today, we've got Jake Freevold, our VP of Product Marketing. Um, oh, I do want to go through a couple of quick housekeeping notes. You can see on the GoToWebinar client, there's a chat bar. Please feel free to chat, ask any questions in this. There's also a questions bar, so you can send questions to us. This is going to be a really interesting webinar, so please ask as many questions as you want, and Jake will get to them at the end. We've allocated some time for that. And also, if we don't get to your question, we will follow up with an answer, I promise. You can also see there's a materials section where you can download the latest piece of collateral that's related to what Jake's about to present. It's really cool. It's really interesting. We've got a fantastic new agentic AI vision that Jake is about to talk to us about. So I think that's everything. Without further ado, I'm going to disappear and I'm going to hand it over to Jake.
Thank you very much, Kurt, and thanks everybody for being here. The title is No, Really, How Far Can AI Push Fieldwork in the Next 2 Years? And yeah, I got some questions about that title, but I will push those off for a few minutes. First, I want to talk about laying a little bit of groundwork about where we are as organizations and helping us understand the current state. When we talk to customers, prospective customers, and so on, we see a lot of different situations that they find themselves in. One of them is they're still using pen and paper. Some people wonder, is that really possible because you're an advanced organization? But there are a lot of people out there who are using pen and paper. There are a number who have taking their first dip into digital transformation and are using laptops to transcribe things. Maybe they upload data into a spreadsheet or type data into a spreadsheet and that gets uploaded later on. There are quite a number of organizations that do that. This third one I have to explain a little bit. It's an AI presentation. You'd expect at least one AI generated photo in it, right? Very often we find that people have more than one major platform that they use to perform certain types of tasks. So very typically for fieldwork, there's a GIS in the system, usually Esri ArcGIS. Very often there's an enterprise asset management platform like an IBM Maximo or something related to that. Very often there could be a safety management system or other kind of system. Whatever that system might be, whatever those systems might be, the field worker has a different mobile app for each one. So they're supposed to be doing asset management, so they're using Maximo Mobile or Easy Max Mobile or something like that to do the job, to do the asset management work. But then they also have to go and update ArcGIS, so they use Survey 123 or Field Maps, and then they also have to update something else, so they use some other tool. So that I call a bolt-on problem. These are mobile apps that are typically bolted onto some other major platform. The other platform is the reason for being. It's the party that owns the responsibility for, let's say, asset management, and the mobile app is kind of bolted onto that as part of that, extension of that platform. So that's the situation we find our poor, sad gentleman in here. He's just got too many individual mobile apps because of all the different masters that he serves. So many people find themselves in that situation. But that situation isn't tenable for very long for the most part. It gets to be really complicated for people in the field to manage. The individual field worker, not being an asset management specialist or not being a GIS specialist or what have you, often has a hard time mixing and matching the various apps that are necessary. So they will relatively quickly, move to IT or a consulting firm and say, how can you help me with this? Now, IT's job in that scenario is to say, well, what is your process? Can we create a new app that takes in all of the data you need and manages that process step by step by step and updates those other applications or other platforms as necessary. So that IT organization getting heavily involved in creating field apps is another very common scenario for us to see. And then finally, well, not finally, but the latest step, the latest part of that process is using a field platform. In other words, the platform for the field has all of the overall field process in it. It collects all of the data for that field process, and it's responsible for communicating with other platforms. We'll talk about that in a lot more detail a little later on. That's really where Fulcrum fits in. Um, and then finally, I'm just going to mention it because people are starting to experiment. I will say that I have heard very few people actually talk about this, but there are people who are just starting to experiment with things like virtual reality or augmented reality or just using smart glasses or other smart technologies in some new and unique way within their fieldwork. That's pretty uncommon. It could fit into that platform's capability. It could fit into other scenarios theoretically, but I'm not seeing it happen a whole lot yet, but we will be talking about that, and we'll be in fact showing you a little bit of that in the immediate future. So wherever you are in this sequence of or evolution of fieldwork, I just want you to know that there's no required progression. There's no evolution that takes you from one step to the next step to the next step. As a matter of fact, many of the people who are most successful with Fulcrum are just now leaving their paper or their spreadsheets behind and kind of leapfrog past the bolt-on problem and leapfrog past the IT amalgam problem and are starting to use the field platform directly. So if you're in one situation, don't worry about the other situations as one that you might have to work your way into. That's not necessarily true. There's no required progression. Now, um, I also want to call out the fact that very often it's not that you're in one of these scenarios. We frequently see something like this. And this is the real problem that we're trying to face and that most people are in, is that you have a very complex and siloed environment where more than one of those things is happening. So you can see by the the clipboards with the pencils on them, that there are some processes that are still being managed in paper, even on inside those organizations that have already done a fair amount of digital transformation. That happens because, for example, they've got something that works really well in most of their scenarios, but there's one very complex thing, and building out that complex process in the digital platform just seems too hard, or the platform's not flexible enough. So they revert to paper because that's the most flexible platform of all. It's not necessarily good from a data capture standpoint. It's not necessarily good from a compliance standpoint, but at least it's flexible enough to capture what they need to do. The other reason that we see for paper to be part of that process is that you've got people who are not really willing to adopt the technology, and the technology is not really built for them. People are not necessarily asset management people, like I said before. They're really the people who are installing transformers, or they're they're the ones who are doing maintenance at a dam. When those things happen, they're performing the work. They're experts at doing that kind of work. They're not necessarily experts at using the kind of asset management platform that we'd like them to use to update the EAM, for example. So a lot of organizations have more than one of these going on at one time. I just want you to be aware of that and to think about how your organization actually functions, not just what you have built and what the ideal processes do, but also what those maybe left behind processes are like. I'm going to return to this as well in the future, but I'm going to be thinking about this complex environment, this siloed environment, quite a bit as we go forward, because that has pretty strong implications for what we can do with AI in the next 2 years. Which brings me to the next topic, which is why did people look at me funny when I said this is something we should talk about? The first one was because it started with no really. If you know me, you know that I'm head of product marketing. I've been in product marketing for a very long time. And you'll also know that marketers make me a little bit crazy, because everything they do, not everything they do, but most of what they do will involve telling you how important something is. And very often it gets amped up to the point where the really important thing has to be managed now, or else there's going to be dramatic repercussions, or you're going to be left behind, and so on and so forth. And if we just look at the history of things like big data and cloud computing and SaaS, we can see that in fact those things did change what we do. They did change our architectures. They did change a lot of the way that we function. They changed our procurement processes. They changed a lot. But as they became normal, as big data just became data, at the early part of that, there was a lot of hype saying, if you don't do this now, then your competitors are going to outstrip you. And if you don't do this now, then you're not going to be able to keep up, and your career will stall, and all those kinds of things. And it took a lot longer than people suggested to have this massive transformation take place. And in fact, the reason blockchain's on here is that we were promised the same kind of thing with blockchain. I don't think the jury's still out on that. There's still use cases that are great for it beyond crypto, I think. But we have yet to see that dramatic transformation that we were told we had to be on top of when blockchain first came out. So I think it's reasonable for a reasonable person to sit here and say, well, okay, we're talking about AI. We've seen some really incredible things happen, but I feel like we've seen this before. And shouldn't we be looking at this with the same kind of caution and figuring it out a little bit better before we, dive into the deep end? Because you can spend a lot of time pretending that you know too much about big data or SaaS and not doing the things that are actually going to get you success there. Whereas if you just held on a little bit and figured out what was going on first, then you'd be more successful with a lot less risk. I think we're at that point with AI. It would be really easy to overhype what's going on with AI, and people do it all the time, especially around agentic AI, which I'll get into in a couple more minutes as well. The other part of this session that people ask me about is why 2 years? And I got some serious push on this from people who are interested in product development and things like that, both at this company and outside. It's like, you can't tell me what's going to happen in 2 years. Let me say that the 2 years is in a way symbolic. I'm not trying to say literally 24 months from now I'm making predictions about what's going to happen, because I would be a fool if I tried to do that. But there are things about what we're seeing in AI right now that kind of fit a 2-year time frame. 2-year-ish time frame. One of those is that we're seeing a very high speed of rate of change in the technologies that we are engaged with. The rate of change is very high, but it's not instant. So we have this sense that, okay, I don't have it now, but it's coming. If you went out today and said, I want to do all of this amazing stuff that I'm hearing about in my processes, particularly in the field, and I want to do it today, there's nobody in the industry who would be able to say, yeah, we got that for you today. You're going to be able to implement and be done. It ain't happening. So we get the sense that, yes, it's happening, but I've got a time frame that I'm working in. And that time frame, therefore, has to incorporate into it the phases that we expect to see. There are going to be changes, and those changes are not coming all at once. That we're going to roll this out in some kind of phased way. And one of the reasons for that, and one of the things we have to think about as we're thinking about what's going to happen with AI over the next couple of years, is the changes in architecture that we can expect. We know that as we are looking at the way AI has already started to develop, that we have had to change the way we think about the way that AI gets layered into our processes. And with any major technological change, you expect architecture changes. So anytime there's architecture changes, you've got to figure that it's going to take more than just the next 3 months or the next 6 months or the next whatever it is. So the 2 years is largely symbolic, but it incorporates these characteristics. I'm not talking about something you can install today, but I'm also talking about things that we should be thinking about now, because in the near future, people will be asking us what we are doing about it, how we're thinking about it, how we're accommodating this amazing new technology that we call artificial intelligence. So with all of that in mind, what I'd like to do for you is something a little unusual for a webinar. I don't normally like to play videos during a webinar, but I'm going to show you something that is otherwise impossible for me to show to you. I can't, like I could say, picture's worth 1,000 words. It's like 10,000 words worth of a picture. And it is a video of an AI, the AI that lives at the heart of Fulcrum, talking to you, narrating to you what she's doing with a field worker who's engaged in a pole inspection. And then you'll see that interaction between the narrator and between the AI rather and the field worker. So without further ado, let's call up the snippet. It's going to be about maybe 2.5 minutes long, something like that. And I'm just going to have us watch this so you can get a sense of what AI could look like in that next symbolic 2 years.
Take a look with me at what the future holds when our field worker puts on his smart glasses with camera and microphone and gets started with his AI-guided experience in Fulcrum. We've arrived at pole 1734. Please look at the top so I can scan for issues.
Sounds good.
I've already guided him to the right power pole. Now I'll capture some information so he doesn't have to, still under his control, of course. No visible defects in insulators or other features.
I agree, log it.
I can help him remember what he needs to do.
Guy wire tension is good.
Okay, what about the guy wire covers?
Oh, right. Covers look good as well.
Got it. Ready for the pole itself?
Let's do it.
The pull tag should read 1734. It appears to be defective. Do you agree?
I agree. It's missing the 3.
Noted. Also, some cracking, but no major defects. Do you agree?
I agree. Log it. Hammer sound test.
There's more to all this than data capture. I help capture the right data with minimal effort, seeing what he sees, guiding him through the process.
Hammer sound is good. Probing below the soil line.
Just like I can help field workers with their jobs, I can keep the office informed of relevant field information.
Northern quadrant might need a second look. What's the SOP for reinspection below the soil line?
The manual says that potential defects should be reinspected and remediated within 30 days. Should I alert the office that pole 1734 should be reinspected using a shovel along with a pull tag replacement?
Yeah, do it.
The pole's inspected, the status is logged, nothing was missed. This is the future of Fulcrum. We're creating an AI-guided experience for every field worker. Last inspection of the day, pole 1735, 50 meters northward up this street.
Metal or wood?
Metal.
Sounds good. I'm going to put my belt in the truck and walk over.
You're due for a water break too. It's 87 degrees.
Good call.
Great. Well, I have to transition here for just a second. And what I hope you got from that is the sense that there can be much more to AI than the reactive kind of vision of AI that we frequently get from the people who are building these kinds of systems. And we're going to talk about what it takes when we have a vision like that. This is, really Fulcrum's vision of what fieldwork is. When we take that vision and shoot for it, what do we need to think about, and how are we going to achieve it? And I think one of the first things we need to think about is the likely causes of failure. What's going to stop us from getting to that point? Because there's nothing I've shown you in that short video that isn't also available now, right? I said the technology is changing, but you're not going to get it. This vision is not going to happen right now because the industry isn't ready for it yet. Nobody can deploy it yet. There's no individual piece of that that's not available. It's just the assembly of bringing that all together into the right context and making it bulletproof in the right ways and so on. So let's talk about what are the likely causes of failure. And I think there's a couple that are fairly obvious. One of them I've already talked about a little bit today already, and that is complex environments. Again, going back to the idea of a platform, and each platform has its own mobile app that is involved in its particular process. That's something that will be a blocker to us because individual pieces of the process lie in individual pieces of the enterprise infrastructure that you have. And in fact, it's actually worse than this. I don't want to make it look as easy as it is right here because it's actually a lot harder. We were talking to a client the other day who said, yeah, I've got this EAM that I use for everything except for water. There's this other EAM that I've got for water, which is a lot better just for that use case, so we're using that. So there's actually all these different shadow pieces behind the pieces. There are maybe platforms for individual parts of the enterprise. Maybe you've got individual business units, and each one has a different application, or you've bought different companies, and that reorganization hasn't yet allowed the convergence of technology, so you're all running off the same platforms, and maybe, frankly, you never will. So there's a lot of different kinds of systems back there that you have to work with, and that's what causes such a complex environment. What that means, like the impact of that, is that if you look at the places that you would go to find the processes for what you're engaged in on a day-to-day basis, what that field worker is engaged in on a day-to-day basis, you're not going to find one, and you're probably not going to find just many. You're going to find many plus spreadsheets plus, again, maybe paper and pencil even, who knows. And if you think about the application of AI to this kind of environment, the question has to be, what happens? How do I know how to use AI in this environment? because each one of these platforms might have its own AI capabilities, and I might end up going from place to place to place to get it. Or if I try to pull back and say I want one AI for the field, well, where is that AI going to go to get all the information it needs about all of the different kinds of processes that are involved here? So one major, in my opinion, obviously foreseeable blocker to this AI transformation is simply the complexity of your environment and that additional complexity that comes with AI being layered in by all of the individual vendors and components of that environment. Another one, and again, this is big, and it's not just about AI per se, but it's the lack of focus on the field. We find over and over again that people have a hard time knowing what the field wants. The field is just special. The requirements are different. So there's been a ton of really incredible things that AI does. I'm personally really annoyed by the fact that it wants me to summarize all my emails, but I do like the fact that I'm able to use it to do code when I'm vibe coding, because I have a little side project that helps me do something fun. The Talking Baby podcast, I was amazed when I found out people hadn't seen this yet. It's one of the best things on the internet. Go find the Baby Talking podcast, or the Talking Baby podcast. It's unbelievable. And the looking for information in ChatGPT or Grok or whatever is also really excellent. But none of it's useful. None of these things, as incredible as they are of any value to the person who's standing in front of a pad-mounted transformer saying, okay, it's time to do my inspection, it's time to do my maintenance. None of it's useful to any of them. So we need to return to first principles. First principles are, don't tell me about the technology, tell me about what I need to do and what my problems are, and then we will assemble the technology to help us solve them, right? That's what we should be doing. So if we really look at what the field issues are, one of them is getting the data that we need. And it turns out that AI is pretty reasonably good at that. It's able to pull information from databases. It's able to do things like it's able to analyze photos and video, things along those lines. So as you saw in the video that I showed you, maybe in smart glasses, looking up, being able to get a picture of what a pole looks like and the attachments on that pole are, and having the AI do an analysis of that photo can be really useful. You can see the same kind of thing over here with a 3D camera that's being put inside of a culvert. There are a ton of use cases where photo and video analysis can give us data in ways that we could get otherwise. We could have a human do that, but it would take longer. They'd have to type it in with two thumbs. They'd have to type it in on a laptop. You'd have typos and things like that. The AI is going to be faster about that, and that puts the field worker in the position of quality assurance rather than of being the first data point, point of data entry. Another thing it's really good at is structuring unstructured data, taking the information that you've got in your PDFs and your manuals and everything else, and being able to assemble that into something that is more structured and can be fed from one system to another or one process to another. And then finally, it can answer. If you ask a question, it knows your context enough to be able to say, yeah, you know what? I get what you're asking for, and here's some of the things that I think you should do, or I know about safety, or I know about the quality specifications you got, or whatever it may be. So AI is pretty good about those things, and if we focus on the field, we should be able to do things like take this three-phase asynchronous motor photo, do an analysis of all the information on it, pull out the ID number, pull out the voltage and wattage and stuff like that, and put that into the data capture process that I needed to do. We should be able to do that. I'd like to pause for a second and just briefly mention agentic AI. Agentic AI is a buzzword right now, and buzzwords are dangerous. But the basic idea behind agentic AI is that it's not waiting for you to do something, right? Instead of me typing something into ChatGPT and having it come back, or instead of me taking a picture and that picture getting submitted and the AI telling me what's on it, an AI agent knows your context, knows what you're trying to do and the process you're engaged in, and makes suggestions. It identifies things and tells the person who's doing the work, here's what you should be thinking about, or some things you could be thinking about, or even just would you like help with that, right? So agents, unlike ordinary AI, agents are going to be proactive. They're going to actively help you before you ask, or at least they're going to be able to suggest things before you ask them to. So agentic AI solutions, because they're quite the buzzword right now, are getting a lot of money in the industry. People are developing a lot of agents. And I think there are three major questions we need to ask people who are developing agentic AI solutions. And this is specifically oriented to field organizations. What questions should field organizations ask? The first one is, do you, the organization that's creating these AI agents, do you understand what the field needs? Because if you don't understand how important GIS is to the field, you're not going to understand interactions with ArcGIS. You're not going to understand that context that helps me do my job every day. If you don't understand any of that stuff, it's going to be really hard for you to map what you are doing to what I in the field am doing. Are you thinking in silos? We had that issue before about our complex environments, and if you got an enterprise asset management platform and the AI is thinking about that enterprise asset management platform and nothing else, that's going to be siloed thinking in your AI, and you're only as good as your silo is. You're not breaking beyond those silos. We have an opportunity here potentially to break beyond silos. We should be trying to make sure that the AI that we're working with is not thinking in terms of those silos. And then finally, who's going to be maintaining them? Is it going to be some consultants you have to hire? Is it going to be an enterprise like the EAM vendor? Is it going to be your own IT staff? Who is going to be maintaining this? What do they know about the field? What do they know about the technology? How adaptable are they going to be in the long run? Whether you're using Fulcrum to do agentic AI or not is not really the question. These are things that you're going to need to think about as you are as you're getting involved in looking at agentic AI solutions. So hopefully it's pretty clear by now that I think it's really important for us to flip the script. Instead of thinking about AI or agentic AI or whatever the technology is, let's start with what the field needs. And as we start with what the field needs, I want to think specifically about how much artificial intelligence can augment human intelligence. And to do that, I'd like to focus on this person in the picture. She is not the one who's performing the hammer sound on the pole, but she is helping that field worker with other activities, other capabilities. She acts as an extra set of eyes. She's able to make sure that what he says is going on is correct and he's not missing anything. She's able to maybe not give him a hand on what he's doing with that test, but she enables him to use both hands to do something where before he would have only had one, perhaps if he's working with a phone or something with the other. She's able to act as a scribe, so she's capturing that information without him having to stop what he's doing so that he can then enter that information into a system. You can imagine somebody who's performing maintenance or somebody who's doing an installation. That scribal process is really, really valuable to the person who's doing that work because they don't have to take their hands off the socket set. And finally, she can act as a smart helper with a clipboard. And clipboard's in scare quotes because it could be an iPad, it could be whatever. She has a lot of technology at her disposal, but the point is that she has books, physical books, PDFs, lookup references, websites, whatever it is that she needs to be able to have in order to give him the information that he needs in that case. So the bottom line is if we can make it so that instead of her going out with him and you have two people when you roll that truck, which makes it really expensive to roll that truck out, she can either apprentice and become one of the same field workers that he is, and now you've doubled your workforce effectively, or if she's not as fit for that and she's better at doing the administrative work and that's why she was sent out in the first place, maybe there's additional administrative work that she could do. The bottom line is she can be much more valuable to your company than she is now when she is just that extra hands and extra pair of eyes and so on. And you can get a much more inexpensive, a much less expensive truck rolling out to do the work of this pole inspection or installation or whatever it is that you might be doing. So we have to think about what this person does that artificial intelligence can augment instead or replace her doing it and instead have artificial intelligence doing it. And there's a ton of things like that if you think about it. Geospatial context is one of them. We all know how important geospatial information is to the typical field worker. What you're looking at here is Fulcrum information in Esri ArcGIS. You can also get ArcGIS information in Fulcrum. Having that context for the field worker can be critically important, and being able to push that context back to people who need to have it in the GIS team is also critically important. That context is one aspect of things. Business context is another that's really important. Here we see the work order that's related to the process that's going on. How can an AI help the individual working the pole know what work needs to be done, how it needs to be done, by when it needs to be done, et cetera. All that kind of work order or other kind of business context can be something that the AI can provide. Specifications, frequently very complex, very job specific. If those specifications can be brought to bear more easily by the AI than by the individual field worker carrying his own stuff, then great. And that's something that an AI can provide. Similarly, process steps. This happens to be the process for a pad-mounted transformer inspection. Pretty complicated. All of those steps are really important. Having the steps in the mind of the person is really good, but having a backup such that the AI can let people know, can let that field worker know when steps are missed or what steps need to take place, can also be extremely valuable. And I'd like to mention like what I call sanity checks, right? And there's really two types in my mind. One of them is the process sanity check, and that is, well, I've got that process that I just showed you. Well, here's all the process steps. I want the AI to proactively tell me when something doesn't look right. In the video, she said, what about the guy wire covers? Well, that makes sense, right? Because that's part of the process she was engaged in. But what if instead you're doing a transformer installation, and before you do that installation, you need to perform a specific safety check? Or maybe you're about to start using a piece of equipment and you need to do an initial safety check of that piece of equipment. The safety check for the piece of equipment, the lockout tagout procedure, whatever it might be, that process is generally speaking different from the process of actually doing the installation itself or actually using the equipment itself. So having all of these things together such that the AI can say, hey, did you remember to do the safety check on the piece of equipment yet? And if the person says, no, I don't remember how to do that, this is a Model 350 and I'm only used to 340s, what do I do? Having the AI be able to manage those processes more effectively could be hugely beneficial. And the other kind of sanity check I like to think about is data sanity checks. So you see here a person using a tape measure to see what the pole is, how high the pipe is above the riprap. So if that person says 24, the height above the riprap is 24, then the measurement is supposed to be in centimeters. Well, you and I can tell, and an AI can tell as well, that that's a lot more than 24 centimeters. So she could question him. Are you sure 24 centimeters? It looks like it's higher than that. He says, oh, I'm sorry, I meant inches. And then she can automatically do the conversion and say 24 inches is X number of centimeters, and you get the final result correctly into the system. That kind of data sanity check is going to make a huge difference to our ability to provide really high quality data from our field workers. Obviously, there's a variety of different kinds of helpful information, driving directions being one. If the AI understands your context, your business process, the workload you got for the day, then she can say, by the way, you're going to be going to Huntington next. Here's the driving directions to where you go, or whatever the helpful information might be. And then finally, various kinds of information that we know is available by reference, but is rarely referenced. This is the Electrical Safety Code Manual. It's got about 400 pages worth of content in it. Yes, if it's digital, you can do a Control F and find a particular phrase, but you might have to look through 13 instances of that individual phrase, whatever it may be. The AI is really good at looking at this context and, having absorbed it, answer a question for you. Say, yeah, you're supposed to do this, not that. You're supposed to, the specification is this, such and such. Being able to do that lookup in the manual without really trying, just by asking the right question and getting that right answer, can be really useful to that field worker as well. So there's a ton that AI is going to do over that next symbolic 2 years that are going to make field work radically different from what it is today. And I think we need to look at how we expect it to evolve, because unless we understand the way it will evolve, we're going to have a hard time adapting to the evolution that we find. One of the questions, I just want to reemphasize this, one of the questions that I do get is, are you talking about really a full evolution, pardon me, are you talking about a revolution here where it's absolutely changing really, really quickly? Or are we talking about an evolution? And I guess it depends a little bit on what you mean by a revolution. Like if you think a revolution can be a 3-year-long process or 2-year-long process, then you can call it a revolution. I'm fine with that. But I want to emphasize the fact that we're dealing with something that is an evolutionary process, even if it's on a tight time frame. And there's really 2 major reasons for that. One is that we're not going to hand over the keys for our most important infrastructure, from which we demand resiliency, to an AI that has not yet shown that it can do everything necessary to keep it up and functioning. We're just not going to do that. In addition, we're not going to hand over our safety requirements to an AI like that, in particular because safety is regulated at the state, local, and federal levels, And there are specific things that we have to comply with and document that we complied with it. Until we get to the point where AI can show us the same kind of rigor that I can show even with pencil and paper, for crying out loud, then we're just not going to hand that over to an AI. And very similarly, quality, and this image makes my brain hurt, but from a quality perspective, we have to understand the quality expectations for our work and our people's work. And that's also not something that an AI understands very well yet. And we need to make sure that we are, until the AI can be as rigorous about quality as we are about quality, until it can be as rigorous about quality as it is about safety, we are not going to just turn the keys over to an AI. In addition, there's one more reason really why we know it's going to be an evolution, and that is because everything else that we've done, every new technology that we've adopted, has similarly been an evolutionary process meant to help the person on the ground. When we started to adopt drones and satellite imagery and aircraft imagery and LiDAR and all these different technologies, it was never to eliminate the process of the person on the ground. All it was there for is to help the person on the ground do their job more effectively. Here, you have to do vegetation management today. Let me send you to the places where it looks like there's a problem because I can detect those more effectively now than I ever was in the past. That way you don't have to drive as far. That way you don't have to go uselessly check out places that turns out don't need vegetation management at all, right? That fact, the fact that all the new technology that we've adopted has really focused on making those boots on the ground do the job more effectively, indicates to me that AI is probably going to be adopted in the same way. In other words, we're looking at an evolution. Yes, it's very rapid as far as evolutions go, but it's not a revolution. And that evolution is in the pursuit of optimization of the tasks that are being done on the ground, not on elimination of human intelligence, not on the elimination of the person who actually has to do the work. That is just not on our current horizon. So as we look then at the evolution that we expect, what do we need to do to prepare for this rapid evolution that's going to take place? And I think the biggest areas that we need to focus really fall into two areas. One of them is data. AI is a voracious consumer of data. If our data house, it doesn't have to be completely in order, but if our data is not, first of all, digital, if you're still on pen and paper, if you are still using any kind of manual process, that data needs to start becoming more digital. The data that we capture needs to include things like the variances that we expect to see. It needs to include outliers that we've captured. Even if the data looks wrong at first, we should know what that data looked like, because the AI is going to use that and say, by the way, it looks like you got an outlier here. By the way, this is what I expect the mean to be. By the way, this is what things should look like. Until the AI knows what things should look like, it can't do anything for us. And what things should look like is what the data defines, right? That's what the data is. So we need to prepare with a ton of data, digital data. And the second thing we need to do is really lock down our processes. And let me not say that what I mean is be inflexible in our processes. We know that we need the flexibility process. We know that when we go from Oklahoma to California, we're going to be doing things differently. So I don't mean lock it down like don't be flexible, but I do mean that process needs to be digitized in some way so it also is accessible to the AI. If you are a technically minded person, if you like databases, you can think of the process as the metadata about the data, right? How did I get the data that I've acquired from the field? The more that we can understand the processes, the more that we can digitize the processes, the more that the AI can understand the processes. And that's when an AI can say, okay, I understand your context, not just the data that I've got, but how you got that data, what steps in the process are necessary to acquire that data, where things sometimes go wrong, where I can see that a process took place and that led to greater variances in the data. There's just a ton more that the AI can learn by understanding what those individual processes are. And for that purpose, they have to be digitized and they can't be overly siloed, which brings me back to this. This environment is not a place where AI is going to thrive. So to the greatest extent possible, to make the field successful, we need the field to not be in this kind of fragmented environment. And that means the field needs its own platform. And I'm going to just drill into this for a second because I think it's so important. And I'm going to blow up this field platform here, actually, by the way. The reason it's important for the field to have its own platform is because any organization that manages its own destiny, that controls its own processes, has its own platform. The fact that there's a separate enterprise asset management platform and GIS is partly related to the fact that there are people in charge of the processes related to asset management and to GIS support. And those political, if you will, structures within your company lead people to say, you know what, I need a platform because the platform is going to contain all of my processes. It's going to control all of my data. And if people want to interact with me, they interact with me through my platform, right? So the platform exists. Any of these platform exists because people have control of the processes in which they are engaged. And one of the unfortunate facts about digital life over the past 50 years is the field frequently doesn't get that platform of their own. The field frequently is begging for scraps at the table of other platforms. The field needs its own platform now more than it ever has in the past because of the transformation to AI, because of the transformation requiring us to capture all of the steps of the process into a single place so that AI can understand it. And so, and for a place for that data to live as we capture this, as we go through the steps in the process, all of that information needs to come to the same place. So one of the most important things you can do, and I know I'm speaking as a vendor here, but I'm speaking as a vendor who believes in this, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing with this vendor. That's why I'm at Fulcrum. What you need for the field to manage this AI transition is, at least in part, a field platform. So what's the path forward then? If we've talked about all these things, and I've talked about a lot of things that are pretty big, right? I need to digitize my data if it's not digitized before. I need to digitize my processes and the steps within those processes so I understand them better. I need to get a certain amount of higher quality. I need to focus on the field. I need to see where AI is. Like, I'm talking about a lot of stuff here, not the least of which is that we need to have a field platform. What's the path forward? The answer I'm going to give you is unsatisfying, and I know that, but bear with me. The answer is to start. Not start like people said when SaaS began. Hey, you know what? Throw everything away. Big bang. We're going to rip that out. We're going to replace it. I'm not thinking that we should do something along those lines. But I do think that we need to start getting our feet wet with these technologies. We need to start actually thinking about the application of these technologies to our problems. Because if we don't get started, then it's all really big and it may never get done because what's the priority on it? And people frequently find themselves, undergoing analysis paralysis and unable to get moving. I suggest that we pick a project, we get started on something that enables us to see the benefits of capturing data digitally. Maybe you're already doing that, so the benefit you're looking for is applying AI to a particular field problem. Maybe you're already doing that, so your project is something else. But get started with something that helps you understand how AI is going to affect people in the field and the field problems that you're focused on. One thing that you should make sure you think about as you're getting started is that you should expect changes in your evolution to occur. So I gave you Fulcrum's vision earlier in this presentation, and that is our North Star. We are going there. But we expect that there are going to be some things that change along the way. So we saw certain things come out faster than we expected. There are things that we're demoing right now or putting into beta right now that we expected to take another 6 months. That's really cool. And there are other things where it's harder. You work on something for a while and you realize, you know what? It got to 80% in like a month. And then getting it to 90% or 95%, whatever viability is for the field, that's taking a lot longer. Expect those shifts. Expect shifts in two ways, really. One is the technology, which is kind of what I just talked about. And the other is in the demands of people around you. What do they really need? And that's going to be from your field teams, because they will start to understand the way the technology can help them, and they will change what you think you should do for them. And the other one is, as you start to get better data and better processes, people around you, and as you start to apply AI, people around you are going to see the change in data, and they might start to say things like, hey, you know what? we're getting more data now than we ever did before. Maybe just as an example, I'm using audio fast fill from Fulcrum right now, and people will talk a paragraph. They'll say paragraphs of information, whereas they used to give me like a word or two, or maybe nothing. We're getting better data. We're turning that data into more structured data. And the fact that you're doing that means I can do much better analysis than I ever used to be able to do. If you're hearing that from somebody who uses your data downstream, listen and respond to that. Because the more valuable your data becomes, the more valuable your job is, the more valuable your projects are, the more likely it is that you're going to be able to say, you know what, I need a certain amount of money to engage in this project. And if you can get a response that's a yes instead of a no, that's huge. So allow people to direct you a little bit on where you're going or how you're getting to where you're going. But keep that vision in mind as you do it. Shift as you need to shift, but keep that vision in mind as you do it. The way that Fulcrum is doing it is specifically, we've got kind of not a roadmap, but a set of guidelines for how we're accomplishing this. The first one, because we do so much around data collection already, is we're focused on things like audio and photo fast fill. Speak into the app, and the app is going to structure your sentences and you choose pick boxes and check boxes and all those kinds of things. We're going to make that data capture easier. We're going to we're working on something that doesn't even properly have a product name yet, right? Like I talked about the fact that these things go faster than you expect sometimes. This is one of them, where I'm calling it Fulcrum Answers for the moment, because a person can use natural language and get a natural language response or a chart or a graph. They can even use other languages right now. Like I tried it the other day with Spanish and Welsh, of all things, just because, and it gave good responses in both of those languages. Being able to have that data at your fingertips, we think, is going to be really, really big. Real-time QA and anomaly detection, or what I was calling sanity checks earlier, is the next on the list for us, followed by that interactive and guided field workflow. And then finally, that'll lead to the vision that you saw, which is that fully hands-free AI and AR-enabled field process, where everything just happens. The AI guides you along, so you've got that AI-guided experience, and your data becomes, at that point, just much more robust, while the field worker is also much more easily able to handle the workload that they have. And I'm going to say, right off the bat, that when we get there in the mythical 2 years, there's going to be a moving goalpost. We're going to want to go somewhere else as well. But we will have gotten where we need to go, or where it made sense to get to by the end of those 2 years. And then at that point, we'll be ready to adapt to whatever the next changes are. So I don't expect this to be the end of anything, but it will be a good way to get us to the point where we can then look beyond that and say, what's our next set of requirements? So wherever you are, and we've got about 12 minutes left in this webinar. I'm done with my talk track, if you will. Wherever you are in your organization, we'd be happy to talk about that. Whether you're already on a platform, you need to move to a new platform that's just for the field because you have certain field requirements that weren't being met. Maybe you built a homegrown system, and that's the kind of thing that you, because you created it, it's gotten a bit too rigid, and you need a way to move off that and be more flexible with what you're doing. The bolt-on problem that we talked about before, maybe you're using a bunch of different apps, or you've got spreadsheets that you're filling out and uploading them, and I put this section on here. I'm kind of proud of these people, the people who saw that on pen and paper, they knew that they would never be able to get to where they had to go. So they came to Fulcrum and talked to us and said, what can we do in order to start to achieve more now with an eye to that future vision that we find compelling but don't know how to get to there yet. Let's leapfrog all these other challenges that other companies have had and really get on the road to that future vision. If you're in pen and paper, there's nothing stopping you from getting started on that right now today. And I encourage anyone who's interested to go out to fulcrumapp.com/vision to get again, a synopsis of this. The full video that I showed today is there. There's other, there's an infographic and some other information that you can find at that vision page. I encourage you to go out there and take a look at what's available. But what I'd like to do now is shift over to answering questions. I've got several of them here. I'm going to turn off the share so you can see my face, if that's okay. All right. And hang on a second, because I am getting a little bit used to the new interface. And there we go. All right. One of the questions So this is from Pete. When you say Fulcrum needs data to learn, train on what is expected, where is that data being sourced from to train or learn the expectations? This is actually a big onion to peel back. Let me say what I don't mean. I don't mean that Fulcrum requires you to pack in a bunch of your own data to then your own pictures, your own whatever, and then Fulcrum is going to take that information and use it for all the other different kinds of processes that we're engaged in. What I mean is that an AI needs data to understand what your variances might be. So within Fulcrum, if you're doing pole inspections, you might see that pole inspections typically take 7 minutes, and the AI can say, well, from the beginning of the time that we started with that pole inspection to the end of the time, typically has been 7 minutes, and over the past 3 months, we've narrowed it down to 3 minutes, let's say. You're not going to be able to see that unless the AI is able to look at your data. That's one answer. Another answer is, and by the way, this isn't about Fulcrum AI. This is about AI generally speaking, right? This is the way AI works. Another answer is, let me talk about the, looking at a transformer. I amuse myself. I always do this. I've got a pole transformer right outside my window, so I always look here when I think about it. If I look at that transformer and take a picture with my smart glasses, then the AI has to know what a transformer looks like, what broken insulators look like, and so on and so forth. That is not something that you need to capture a bunch of pictures for and give to Fulcrum so that Fulcrum's AI can then do it. What we're currently doing with our beta photo fast fill is using an LLM that has that kind of capability built in. Your data is not being used to train that LLM. It's just having the LLM react to that picture. And so in that sense, do you actually need to have data now in order to get that capability? No. Similarly, with the ability to read a nameplate on a piece of equipment, no, you don't need to train to use your data with 1,000 nameplates so that Fulcrum can then read those pieces off. That's going to be handled by the AI that we're using, and none of your data is going into training that. So I know that's only a partial answer to that question, but I hope it gives you a sense of what it means to need data. Really, the data that Fulcrum needs to have exposed for an AI to understand it is your specific data, so it learns your process and can customize what's going on to your specific processes and needs. I hope that helps, and if you have any questions or follow-up, please do. Another question is, will the uptake of AI features affect customer use cases that do not take on these AI features, at least not straight away? Will features remain optional and not pushed, is the question. So one of the questions I've heard is, can I turn the AI stuff off? And the answer is yes. Right now, certainly as we're building out our AI features like audio fast fill, some people say, I really don't want people using that. There are a bunch of reasons. And we can just turn those off at the feature level to make sure that you're not using them. There are reasons to do it. There are reasons to leave it on. We can talk about the pros and cons of why, but the bottom line is that capability has to be there, and it is. One of the questions is, are we using the AI assistants from the Esri products? No, the AI assistants that we are using right now are different from the AI capabilities in Esri. And those two are just fully independent. We don't use the Esri capabilities at all. Ours are actually quite different. I recommend if you look at the Esri, the way that Esri is building AI into their tools, it's different from the way that AI is being built into the Fulcrum platform. And I encourage you to just take a look at them and decide what's more valuable or more useful for your particular use case, for the way that you build apps and so on. Another question I have here is, we already have integration platforms to bring processes together and data warehouses to bring data together. Why doesn't that solve the problem of getting the right data and metadata for AIs to process? Okay, so that's a little bit of a mouthful, but let me just, if I can break it down. A data warehouse is there to house data from everywhere, right? So theoretically, I'm consolidating all my data into the data warehouse. And I've got an integration system that is supposed to make processes work together. It's a workflow management system, or it's what we used to call an EAI tool or an integration broker. It's whatever it might be. There's stuff that you use there. One that a lot of people are familiar with is Microsoft Power Automate, for example. We've got Microsoft Power Automate. Why doesn't that help me? The answer is on the let's talk process first. If you have a process management platform of some sort, call it workflow management or whatever you want to call it. If you have that platform, its job is to orchestrate stuff that's happening in other systems, other platforms. So it takes the process that was engaged in the EAM, the Enterprise Asset Management Platform. It takes that process, the outputs of that process, and after that process is done, it hands a piece of it off to ArcGIS, and then hands another piece off to something else. And maybe it engages in multiple steps. So it does something with ArcGIS, and then ArcGIS responds, and then back to ArcGIS again. And then it turns over here and does something with HR to manage the number of hours that people are engaged in or something like that, and then HR responds. So, but the important thing here is it's taking the outputs of each of those other platforms and only managing their outputs. And very often what's happening in the field is smaller than that. What's happening in the field is each individual step of the inspection, each individual step of the safety check, each individual step of the installation that you're doing. So the business process management platform, workflow management platform, generally speaking, doesn't have that level of detail, which means it doesn't know about what's happening in the way that the video I showed you earlier knows what's happening, right? It doesn't have insight into that. And because it doesn't have insight into that, it can't help you. So you need something that's got the detailed level of granularity for the field tasks that the field is engaged in, and then any other interactions that happen with other systems are also going to take place, but they're outside of what the field does. Those are things that those other platforms and those other business units then go take care of. Hope that was reasonably clear. If not, please feel free to come back to me. The question from Patel, can we use AI as in a use case tailored to QA/QC? And he gives an example. Pole removal to check if the contractor completely removed the pole, performed site restoration, removed all anchors, guy wires, etc. The answer is yes. Any process that the field is going to be engaged in theoretically can have AI applied to it. So what would that look like? Right now in Fulcrum, that process could be part of a single, what we call a Fulcrum app, right? So the individual app would say, okay, I want to do a QA of the pole removal. The pole removal would have a step in it, check to see if the pole is completely removed. A person in Fulcrum today would say yes. Was the site restored? Maybe there's multiple steps underneath that. Yes. Removed all anchors? Yes. Guy wires? Yes. The way Fulcrum does that with AI today is using something like Audio Fast Fill, where you click a button, you speak to Fulcrum, and you say, the pole removal was completed completely, the pole was removed properly, the site restoration was correct with X, Y, and Z done, and they removed all anchors, removed all guy wires, etc. You're done, and then once you're done speaking, Fulcrum will check all those boxes for you, right? So this is not speech to text. This is speech to data. And it'll check all those boxes for you. And when it checks all those boxes for you, it's just as if a person had come to do that QA and QC and had checked all those boxes manually. In the future, that vision that we're talking about right now, I'd rather not have to even have somebody say those things if I don't have to. So you can walk up with your smart glasses on, take a look at it, and the AI will say, looks like the pole removal was complete, looks like the site was restored, looks like there was no anchors and guy wires. There's a questionable area in the northwest quadrant. Can you go look at that? And then the person will go to the northwest quadrant and see, oh yeah, you know what, they left in one of the anchors. So, they didn't do the job right. So hopefully that answers your question. There's actually multiple steps involved. There's the QA process. That process can be implemented now digitally. That process can be implemented now with AI in certain ways. And in the future, we expect agents to guide the process and make it easier for the person out in the field to say that's done. I think I got time for one more question. Do you offer consulting services for small companies to help us determine best practices to optimize our Fulcrum experience? The answer is yes. We can help you with whatever kind of best practices you feel you need, and just feel free to reach out to us and just ask the question. We'd be happy to help. We have hit the top of the hour. Thank you very much for your questions, for your interaction. If you do have further questions, please reach out to us. Like I said, we'd love to hear your experience, whether it's with Fulcrum or not. We'd love to hear what you want, whether you can get it from Fulcrum today or not. We're actively building this stuff. We're actively talking to customers, and we would love to have a conversation with you as well. So thank you very much, and everybody have a great day.